Hey guys, welcome back to the Art Ninja Gaming channel. I am Art Ninja and this is part 2 of Mortal Realms Monday's miniature painting, episode 1. If you haven't checked out part 1, go and do that. I'll post a link up just at the top there, and so we can now get to it. Okay, so now that we've got all the washes have all dried, you can see they've left its darker areas. We're going to go back over with the base colours and just bring that back to the lighter shades, leaving sort of darker recesses along here, down in here, and yeah. So first of all, back to the Sequitor blue, and this time round you do want to make sure that you're using thin paint, as in adding a bit of water to it. The idea is to build this up in a couple of layers. You're not going to get it in one coat again, but we don't want it to do that. I'll show you why as we do it. Alright, so all we want to do now is obviously paint up along any highlight areas, up along here, but don't go quite up to the creases where the shade has settled, and leave just before the belt and any surfaces or any creases, I should say. And what you want to do is make sure that you pull up away from the shaded areas, as where your brush leaves the model is where the majority of the paint will end up deposited. So if you brush down in and then pull off, you're going to leave more paint down at the bottom than you will at the top. So just a small amount here, and again, we're not looking for maximum coverage, but we are with this looking to cover the majority. It's just the deepest recesses that we're leaving. So obviously an area like this, underneath you're going to have shadow, and then as you come down here it's going to get lighter, so we want to pull this way but keep that area up against that crease dark, and then here obviously just under here, along here, and then just leave it just before we get to the edge there, or to the where it meets the fold. And then the same with this, we'll just stop there. And what we'll do as we build this up, as it dries, it will eventually bring back to the original Sequitor blue colour, apart from those darker areas. And each time you go over, pull back just a little bit more from where you last left. I'll explain that a little bit better as we do it. Bit more water. Like I say, you want to keep this relatively thin so that you have a bit more control. And sort of what we're trying to do here is gradually build it up from dark to light. So obviously you've got that dark area in there. I'm going to leave that. And then same with the shoulder pads. The way you want to do it with these is leave a gap just around the edge where it meets the gold area, and then everything else back in with that Cantor blue. And it is important that from time to time you do rinse your brush off. This stops paint from drying deep down in the bristles and ruining your brush. So every now and then just give it a little bit of a rinse off and clear some of that paint off of it. And try not to load up more than halfway up the bristles. You don't want to come down into this metal area here called the foil, as the paint will dry right in the edge here, and then that causes your bristles to split open. Alright, we'll leave the majority of the blue in there, that will be dark. So back to this area. Now what we've got is this dark area here just near the creases. Instead of going right up to the edge of where we've just laid that layer of blue, we come back slightly from it so that this will give a gradation from that dark to the first layer to this layer, and you can do this as many times as you like, stepping back slightly each time to leave a little bit more of the previous layer, and as it gets brighter and brighter, more saturated in the colour, you'll get that sort of that layered lighter look. This is why we're using a fairly diluted paint, you know, thinned down so that it will go on brighter. As it dries, it then gets that blend there, and this is what's known as the layering technique, or as far as I know, I call it the layering technique, because you're working in thin layers. And obviously, because we are doing this for a battle ready model and not a full parade ready or, you know, competition quality or anything like that, we don't have to get a hugely smooth gradient, otherwise we'll be here forever trying to achieve that with multiple layers. So we'll just do these 2 layers and then we'll move on to the next shade. And what we're going to do is now get each area finished with its second coat and its highlight layer. So again, stopping just shy of where the last layer went on. Just over the rim there, and again just in this area here. Like so. Let's go back over this slightly. There we go. Just a little bit more on this area here. Obviously these aren't going to be too much in shadow. Right, so now what we're going to do is take this blue, get that out of the light there, and this is going to be used for our edge highlight, but also for another layer of light. So what we're going to do is take some of this Cantor blue and we're just going to mix it in and try and get about a 50-50 shade and thin it down slightly, just between the Cantor blue and the Teclis there. And again, make sure it is relatively thin. It should be fine. Alright, rinse that off. Too much paint up the bristles there, and we don't want that drying. Alright, so again, I'm just going to go in along the highlight edge here. It will appear bright to start with, but that will dull down a little bit as it dries. Just a little bit more water in there, get it a little bit thinner. Go. Just a little bit more of the contour in there. Get it for a slightly closer blend. And same with the pauldrons here. Again, come back slightly from where we were doing before. Okay, so now we can go back in and again leaving some of that previous layer, and we're just looking to fill in a smaller area now. And like I said, we're not looking for the smoothest transition. If you were doing that, then you're going more for parade ready. But we do want a little bit of a subtle change between the colours here. Okay, and what you can do, if you have an area where it looks like it's too contrasting, just go in with a slightly over thinned, slightly darker paint, and you can sort of blend the two together by going just over the edge slightly and bring it back in. And what that'll do as that dries, that'll darken up and that'll blend your edges back in. I'll get rid of that harsh line between the two colours. Right, so all that's left now is for a little bit of edge highlighting, done with the Teclis blue. So just going to thin that down slightly. That was the unthinned section of paint that I'd left. And all we're going to do is just pull our brush down into the paint. Now all we want to do is just touch the very top of any recesses, sort of the highlight areas. Alright, right along the top of the rim here. Try and get that on both sides, and what you're trying to do is use the edge of the brush and just pull it along the edge, sort of any hard edge. Okay, so again, we've got a hard edge here slightly. We'll just follow it up until it becomes less of an edge, like so. Obviously you've got hard edges right along the end of the cloth here. You only want to do this where the light would actually catch, so not down into any shaded area. Where the edge is slightly more rounded, you do have to be careful, try and keep that line thin. So down this edge here, you're not going to be able to use the side of the brush, so we'll just try and paint a thin line and then stop before we get down into the dark recess, and then the same with these little folds or ripples just at the top here along this edge and this one here. Okay, and then for the pauldron, thin it down slightly, and what we're looking to do is just around the top and the edge here, and then just up the centre where the highlight would be, and then the same here. This will be more of a strip down either side as the highlight catches the middle. That seems to went onto the white area there, but that's okay, it's not a problem. And there we have it. That's the blues done. I know that does look quite sharp on camera, but that is a lot less bright than that. I will post some photos, or put some photos up at the end so you can see what it does look like without the harshness of the camera picking up all that detail. Okay, next onto the cloth, which was the Ushapti bone. So again, put some of this onto our palette. Clean the brush off. Pick up a small amount of water and thin that slightly. Alright, and same principle really. Pick up anything off the top and edges and try and leave where that shading has gone darkest. On flat areas that you know would be light here, if it's settled, then you can just go straight over that. But down in the recess here, obviously, we know that that would be light. So again, leave some of those edges. And just bring it down, up from that darker area. And then along any sharp edges such as this. And then again, once that's dried, come in slightly, build up that layer. And then don't forget a bit on the back here. Right, and for the extreme highlight on this, we're going to use the pallid witch flesh. Again, put some of this down. And then this is just for edge highlighting. You don't need a lot, you can use this neat. It's quite a thin one anyway. We're just doing for along here, along the edge. Again, if you want to thin it down and use the same steps that we did with the blues, you can do, but for this, because it's a small area, you don't need a huge amount of gradient with it. But you can wet your brush slightly and just blend it back if you need to. Right, and then for the back, it's literally just on the edges. And that's that part done. Right, now we'll do the white in here. One thing we didn't do was put a wash in there because the non-oil is too much for it. It tends to make it too harsh. So what we're actually going to do is take some of the Abalone black and some of that pallid witch flesh and almost make our own wash with it. Put that there. So we're just going to dull this down to a very light grey. Thin it down, not too much, otherwise the pigments will separate and then it just won't cover right. And the consistency we're looking for is that of skimmed milk. And all we're going to do with this is literally paint in the shaded areas with this wash. So just paint it down into the recesses and then come back up towards the white slightly. Because it's thin, it'll go in nicely. If too much goes on, clean your brush off whilst it's still wet. Just pull it away slightly and then blend it back up. Don't worry if it's too harsh, because once that's dry we are going to go back over with a layer of, find it, with a layer of white scar. And again, slightly thin down. We don't need to thin this too much, this one, it is a layer paint. So that should be dry in there now. So all we're going to do is start at the highlights and come down to those shaded areas. Obviously that blue is going to take me a little bit to cover up. If you didn't have this problem, then you're fine. I think we're going to have the white over the bottom of all this. It looks cleaner. So we're just going to go around, making sure not to go onto the blue on the top edge there, and just go in and grab all these bottom areas. Okay, so there we go. That's the white done, just in there. So now onto the gold. So again, Retributor armor. Right, thin this down slightly, but not too much. It is quite a thin paint anyway, the golds. Okay, so starting at the feet here, we'll work our way up. All we're doing is the edges, and then taking that just shy of the shaded area, top of the knee here, leave the underside. Same with this top here and this area. Try not to go over the joins where the non-oil, or the other one, the Agrax earth shade rather, where that fell into. So the Under Armour here, the belt, and I'll just finish up this and then I'll come back to you in a second. Right, with the pauldrons here, or the edges of them, take it right up to the edge, but do leave some of that dark area there. And then if you can, just catch the edge of this raised area on the other side of it. Don't forget the emblem on the pauldron here. And the pommel on the hammer. Right, so that's all our gold retouched. Right, now if you have a brighter gold, you can go ahead and use that for this part. I'm going to use Runefang steel and mix that in with the gold there, the Retributor armour, to get a slightly lighter, brighter gold. this is for is just some edge highlighting. And all we want to do is just capture all the edges with this. It may not stand out too much on camera. I'm not too sure what that's doing. But we're just looking to go around all the edges. You can go slightly onto the flatter parts with this, as we are going to do a slight edge highlight with silver anyway. So I'll just do this and then we'll be back in a second. Right, what you want to do as well is just pull some of this along the top of the thigh there, down the calf, just to the small area where the light would catch the most. Obviously off the edge of the boots here. Don't need to worry too much about underneath, because obviously our light source is coming from the top, so it's not going to hit too much of it. I'll just catch the knuckles and stuff here, catch the top of the helmet, and then here. And for the final piece, we're just going to take some of that Runefang steel. Don't need to thin it down or anything. And just as an extreme edge highlight on the highest, most raised areas, just going to do a slight edge highlight, just where the light would catch the peaks of the gold. So just along these sort of edges here. Make sure it's broken up, don't do it all the way around an edge, as that won't look right. So just at the top here, a small line on the thigh here, top of the knee, centre line down the foot, as well as just come off slightly from the points there in both directions. And the same on this side. And around the back, just a little bit off the edge here, around this corner here, and over the top here. And then just a small amount just off to one edge of the helmet there. So again, I don't know if that's showing up on the camera or if it's too intense. That's pretty much what we're aiming for. Alright, so that's the golds done. So now what we're going to do is take some of our white and our black. I'm just going to mix up a fairly dark grey here. No point in pulling out another paint for this. All we're going for is just some edge highlighting and slightly into the leather here. Thin that down slightly. So again, just on areas where the light would catch. If you do too much, just touch it with your finger. Now pull some of the paint off and pull it back slightly. we go. Right, and now we need some of the Runefang steel. Yeah, we didn't place that down, we haven't used that yet. So Runefang steel, just a small amount down on the palette there. And this is for all the silver areas. I'm just going to go back over and touch these up to brighten them up. Obviously try not to get it down into the darker areas. And then one other areas that we're going to use this for is these little rivet type things. We're just going to catch the tops of each of those just to make them stand out a little bit. And then we got the ones just down along here, and then if you want you can do the ones on the pauldron. Right, just finish these and then I'll be back in a sec. Right, so just a couple more things and then we are all but done with the main model, and then we can move on to the shield and then the base. What I will do is paint the shield off camera, but it is following the same techniques as these, as we have done here. Go in with the base colours, do your base layers, go over that with the washes, and then back with the base colours and then some highlights. I will show you the shield once it's done so you can see what you're aiming for. Right, so that's that done. So now we're just going to take some of this white lighten this up slightly, and then we're aiming to not too much paint on the brush. We just want to sort of pick off the edges. White, get that lighter, and then same again. This time we are going for the extreme edges. There you go. Alright, and then just with our Runefang steel here, we'll just go in some highlights along the edge of this. If we mix a small amount of white in with it, it'll brighten it up slightly, but it will also dull it down, so be careful. And then we'll just go in, and again, like we did with the gold, just sort of broken up highlights just on the extremes of the hammer there, and the top of his emblem. We can also bring in some of that we didn't quite do there. Right, so all that's left to do now is some dry brushing on the handle here, and then he is done. Right, so I'm just going to use some pink horror here, and I do have a tutorial on dry brushing, a PDF on the Patreon page. But the idea is to put the paint on your brush. A flat brush does work best, and then get pretty much all of it off, and then all you're doing is just gently brushing across the model on the areas that you want highlighted with this colour. Now, it will take a few passes to brighten it up, and you can do this with brighter layers each time if you wanted to. Just very gently pulling across. And what this is doing is just catching the paint on the highest peaks, the sharpest bits of detail, and leaving the darker paint underneath. And then we'll just touch into the white slightly. Make sure that when you're dabbing this off, you are doing it on dry towel, not wet. You don't want to wet this paint down. Obviously the effect is called dry brushing, so the idea is to have it as dry as possible. Right, and now for the red here. I'm going to go back in with the Mephiston red. Put a small amount of that down. And thin it down slightly. There isn't a huge area to this, so it won't take very long to do. But again, same method. Applying a slightly thinned down layer, leaving some of that dark recess, and then come back a millimetre or so with each successive layer that you want to do. But I find for this level of painting, just a couple of layers is enough. Right, and then I'm just mixing some of this pink horror if it hasn't dried already. No, that dried. That's fine. You could do this with a lighter shade, something like Evil Sun Scarlet or something like that, if you wanted to. There we go. That's the highlight done. Right, so there we have it. That's the finished Sequitor. What we'll do now is paint up the shield, like I say, in the same way, and then I'll come back once the shield's done, and then we'll show you how to do the base. Okay, so once the shield is done, this is how it should look, and there is your completed Sequitor. The only thing missing now is to do the base. So all we're going to do for the base is grab a nice large brush. We're going to do a quick coat of Eshing Grey over the entire base. Thin it down slightly. And the only bit that we want to avoid is the outside edges here where the dirt is, but otherwise we want to get everything else on here. Don't worry if you go over the leaves and that, or some of the dirt, obviously that will be touched up later on. So this may take a couple of coats, or a couple of layers, so I'll be back in a second. Okay, so once that has a pretty even coating of the what was it? If I can find the paint now. The Eshing Grey, that was it. It's time to go on with Dawnstone. And what we're going to do with this is just a couple of layers of dry brushing. So we don't need much paint, probably not even that really, probably could have dipped into the pot. So just again, dry brushing, wipe off most of the paint, and then just over the top. We do want this quite a heavy layer, or not so much layer but multiple layers on this. We're looking to pick up the majority of the high points and trying to just leave out some of those low points there. So half the brush, the bristles filled with paint, wipe the majority of it off, a bit too much, and then just pull across the surface. This may take a few over, you know, going over it a few times, a few layers to get the desired effect. Right, so once that's done, that should be what you are aiming for there, something along those lines. What we're now going to do is a very light dry brush of pallid witch flesh mixed in with a small touch of that grey that we just used, the Dawnstone. Just get some new drier tissue there to wipe onto. So just a bit of the grey, mix that in. Sort of a 70-30 mix. Right, so load up the bristles, dab the excess off. Now all we're trying to do with this is just catch the edges. We don't want to go over the whole model with this, or the whole base, but we do want to catch the edges of everything. So try not to get it down in the recess there, but we do want to catch the edges of that. Just put them across here. And again, it's just a case of going over, trying to build it up, and pull out those edges. And then you can do just a few gentle strokes across the top. There we go, and that is the stone done. Right, now for all the leaves down there, we're going to use Cabalite Green. Don't need a lot of this. Leaves are small, and obviously the leaves you can do any colours you want, really, depending on the season that you're looking for. If you want to go for more of an autumn look, then you can go for browns and yellows. If you want to go for winter look, then obviously you would cover the base in a snow material. But for this, we're just going to do the leaves greens and maybe a couple of the browns. So again, just pick out all the leaves with this green, and I will be back in a second. Okay, so once you've got all the leaves done with the Cabalite Green, then we can go ahead and use some Warpstone Glow. And what you can do is use this pretty neat. You can do a 50-50 mix with part of it with the Cabalite for another shade of green. Not too much there. And all we're going to do is just paint either half of each leaf, leaving that cabalite green down in the centre there. So just here and then up this side. So I'll go around and do that on these, and again you can use, switch between the two different greens that you've got there, vary it about a bit. Right, so once you're done, that is what you've got for the leaves. Right, and the only thing left to do now is the brown around the edge, which we're going to first do with Mornfang brown. Right, and as usual you will want to thin this slightly. And then just cover all the areas of dirt around the base here. Obviously be a little careful, but not, you don't have to worry too much about going onto the grey that we've already done here, as it will just look like a bit of dry mud that's been scuffed onto the dirt. Obviously try not to go too far in. What you can also do as well is, once the model has been completely done, you've got something to hold on with the figure. You can take this Mornfang brown and just go around the edge here. Obviously it's a little bit more difficult for me with it being in the holder here, but you can just go around and just do the outside rim, and that will give it a nice finish around the edge of the base there. So I'll just go around and get this on, and then I'll be back in a second. Right, so there we go. I've got the Mornfang brown done, and as you can see I did a quick one around the side there, so that's that all done. So now we need to do a dry brush layer of Scrag brown. So just take a small amount of that. And with a completely dry brush, it is important to make sure that your brush is dry when dry brushing. We'll just gently pull over the surface. and these areas here just start up near the rock edge there and just pull downwards. You can even drag your brush sideways as long as it's parallel. That will go over the top of anything there. So I'll just give this a few layers and we'll be back. Right, and so there we have the base. It's a little difficult to see in the camera there. And for one final highlight, we're just going to do another dry brushing of Zandri dust over the area. This will be a little bit more loosely applied. It's just a very quick light dusting. There we go. Right, and there we go with the model on. This base is finished. Obviously just need to do a bit of touch up around the rim there, but he is now ready for battle. It is a battle ready paint job. So once again, I'd like to thank you all for sticking through and watching that tutorial. If you did like the video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button for more Mortal Realms Mondays as well as other videos. Like I say, every Monday will be a new episode of Mortal Realms where we paint a figure from the Mortal Realms magazine. I do also upload videos of gaming as well as other painting related videos, tutorials, how-tos, little techniques, things like that, as well as some speed paints. I also stream on Twitch, so if you'd like to check that out, then head on over to Twitch. The link for that is down in the video description there, along with a list of the paints and my Twitter and Instagram. You know, check those out, hit follow on them, and you can keep up to date with what I'm doing. You know, any news, cancellations if I need to for live streams, updates on videos, things like that. And I'm also running a Patreon, as I said earlier. It's just a tier 1 at the minute, but you know, if you want to sign up to that, there's a few PDFs on there. I am uploading as many as I can each week as I can make, and eventually I plan to open up a few more tiers there. But you know, just the tier 1 at £2 a month, you know, it shows your support, helps me out a lot, you know, more than you'd think. You know, 2 subscribers a month, that's a pot of paint a month. You know, 10 subscribers, that's 5 pots. So you know, it does help, and it is much appreciated. And that brings us to the end of that. So I'll just put a quick photo up here of the finished model so you can see a better quality of it, and I shall catch you guys next time. Take it easy, guys.